Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. This is Midas and I'm back again with another Battlefield 1 video. Now, as you read the title of this video, I want to talk about something that a lot of people are actually speculating and spreading rumors about it these days. And that of course is the next Battlefield game. I don't want to speculate about it. I just want to point out a few things regarding the let's say one of the more popular rumors out there, stating that the next game is going to take place in World War II. And before we get into this, I want to say that this is no essay. I haven't written down anything. I'm just sitting here chilling and talking to you guys. I'm not a fan of writing stuff, although it makes my videos more fluent, but hell, I just can't, I just have to sit down and start talking with you guys, even though the view count is not as high. But then again, so yeah, Battlefield 2018. There are a lot of rumors around regarding the next Battlefield game going back to World War II. Now, in my last video, I said that I hope the next Battlefield game wouldn't set on World War II. Now here's why. We have had a very similar situation, to say the least, with Battlefield 3 and 4. So I want to talk about a few things, and this is the topic number one. Between Battlefield 3 and 4 there was a 2-year gap. And well, Battlefield 3 was a very good game, and then Battlefield 4 came out, which was a very good game, to be honest, but the problem was the instability of that installment. The game was working 10% of the times at launch, and lawsuits started suing EA Games for pushing the products and false advertising. And it was true that the product was rushed, and DICE clearly didn't have enough time to make it, to make Battlefield as good and as polished as it should have been at the first place. Sure, it led to many good outcomes. The creation of CTE, for example, was one of the greatest things to happen for a Battlefield game in many years. But hell, that was rising from the ashes of people's trust, from the ashes of the catastrophe of Battlefield 4's launch. Now, one thing is that if we are going to see a Battlefield game developed by DICE Sweden, or EA DICE, the main branch of the EA DICE, it's a 2-year lifespan, because we're talking about AAA games with huge budgets and of course a huge market. Is that going to be the same situation as compared to Battlefield 3 and 4? And we're talking about Battlefield 1 and a possible World War II installment coming this year. Now obviously this has nothing to do with World War II. This is just about the time gap between the release of two titles, and I totally understand it. The second point I want to mention here is that I think we're looking at a similar situation. If you remember, when we look at Battlefield 3 and 4, both games are great games, but they had the same setting, almost the same setting. If you know the lore of Battlefield 3 and 4, Battlefield 3 takes place during, I believe, 2014, then Battlefield 4 follows up in 2020, so a 6-year gap. Battlefield 4 and 3, they were both modern military shooters. Now, what was the situation back then? Battlefield 3 was a very good game, and back then we, as a player community, we didn't really care this much about factors like customization, player skins, different downloadable content. Although BF3 did a very, very good job regarding the weapon customization and the DLC content, we all know for a fact that Battlefield 4 did a far better job. So if you compare those two, Battlefield 3 looked like a minor, let's say, setback towards a path that led to Battlefield 4, a superior customizable experience. So for example, if you remember weapons from Battlefield 3, in Battlefield 3 you could customize your weapon. You could add a few sights for your weapon, a silencer or a heavy barrel for your barrel attachment, and a grip or laser sight, or a lot of 1 and 2 minor different attachments on your weapon. But when you look at Battlefield 4, we've had different barrels, different grips, bipods, a massive arsenal of different sights, canted iron sights, different laser points all over the place, and it was far superior. The same applies to vehicle customization, the same applies to weapon camos and paint jobs and everything. So in a way, I'm just saying this, in a way, if you compare Battlefield 4 and 3, Battlefield 3 looks a lot lacking and lackluster in terms of content. And with each and every DLC dropped with Battlefield 4, tons of new dog tags, tons of new weapon skins were dropped, and in addition of great Easter eggs and community Easter eggs, actually, specifically the Phantom program, which was amazing. Now, what I wanted to say is this the same pattern here? You see, Battlefield 1 is a great game. We're not talking about those minor issues, those minor frustrating issues. We're talking about the entirety of Battlefield and the whole perspective of Battlefield. It is a great game. We've seen all-out war with an amazing level of detail. And although it looks like to be all the battles in Battlefield 1 looks like to be set into the past few weeks of World War I, because of how advanced everything is in the game. You see many automatic weapons, you see mechanized battles with tanks, planes, horses. We see elite units, flamethrowers, machine guns, and all the other stuff. The game is amazing, but one major issue with Battlefield 1 was the lack of content, the lack of drop rate for DLC, which, you know, depleted and drove away the entire player base in a very fast pace, and was destructive for the play count of the game. And one more thing, that the lack of customization and personalization is really irritating sometimes. You see, the predecessor of Battlefield 1 was Battlefield 4, the king of customization. I have never seen an FPS, an arcade FPS game, to deliver this amount of customization. You could set your own emblem on your weapon, then a legendary camo, not like the legendary camo that you used to get from loot box, the one that you actually completed an assignment for it and used to grind for it. And then you used to customize your weapon in your own way. You, for example, you could add a mid-power scope with a grip and a heavy barrel. So you would use an automatic weapon, you would utilize it in a semi-auto manner in order to cover long ranges, and that would be awesome. In Battlefield 1, however, the only thing you can really customize about your weapon is the magnification, which is pretty cool, and I hope we see that in next games. And that's it. If you pick up the suppressive variant of the LMGs or any scoped rifles, you can only change the, let's say, the crosshair of your rifle and the power of your magnifier scope, and that's all. Of course, you can add a bayonet, or for the SMGs you can change the recoil direction, but I mean, which one of you guys changed recoil from upwards to right or left? I mean, that's kind of stupid. Of course, this is understandable. We were back in World War I. Customization really didn't exist that much. But what about personalization? We cannot change weapon cameos. Weapon cameos do exist, but in a very minor level. Like, we have one legendary camo, 3 distinguished camos, and like, I don't know, 9, 8 special camos for every weapon. That could be cool, but when you look at it, you have to gain every single one of them from loot boxes, and loot boxes aren't popular around these days. Even if they were popular, and I have no problem with that, I have to say, I would prefer the old system where you see this cameo on your menu, and you say, oh, that's beautiful, and there are requirements for it, there are assignments, and you had to complete those assignments in order to access those certain cameos, and that would bring on the feeling of accomplishment, and you would proudly use that beautiful paint job on your weapon and show it off to others. That was the way to do it, and I hope that returns. You see, there are a lot of tiny gaps in the personalization factor, and there are other problems here and there, which I don't want to talk about it because that's kind of irrelevant. But here's the thing, is this the same situation? Are we going to see the next Battlefield fulfilling all these gaps and let's say deliver a far better experience? When you look at it, Battlefield 3 had a great arsenal of weaponry, both at launch and by the end of the release of the final DLC. But when you compare it to the Battlefield 4 arsenal at launch, well, that was crazy. That shit was crazy, man. We've had, what, assault rifles, PDWs, LMGs, sniper rifles, DMRs, shotguns, carbines, pistols. Holy Jesus. Even if you add DLCs to it, the number of weaponry in that game was insane. The number of choices players had was incredible. And I think that this pattern is going to happen in the next Battlefield game if it's going to be set on World War II specifically. I mean, it's obvious. More weapons were introduced and invented in the time gap between World War I and World War II. The developments in technology were incredible back then, in that time gap in specific. And well, there's no denying that customization could return to some extent. What is my problem with this specific topic is that this is not okay, you know. Some of the past few great releases of Electronic Arts, we have seen this pattern, that the first game is not cool, it has some major holes in it, and then the second one fulfills it. Even though that first game doesn't have to necessarily be the first game of a franchise, but it could be the first game compared in a time frame. Battlefield 3 could be the first game in this instance. Then 2 years later, Battlefield 4 came out with a far greater personalization. Star Wars Battlefront was an utterly incomplete release. Then 2 years later came Battlefront 2, which was on a whole different level of customization, especially after the revamp of the progression system and the removal of star cards and pay-to-win loot boxes. That's a different story, however. And now I think this same pattern is about to happen with Battlefield 1 and a possible World War II setting. I mean, that's not cool. We want good products. We want products that are polished and complete. We want products that have that level of satisfaction. You know, when you play them, you feel like, okay, this content can keep me playing for 100 hours, 200 hours, 300 hours. I myself dropped Battlefield 1 after watching like 30 or 40 hours of gameplay after its launch. I used to watch like 30 hours of gameplay of its alpha, like 30 hours of its beta, and 50 or 40 hours from its post-launch gameplays. I started playing it for like 40 hours, campaign and multiplayer, and I dropped it. And I said, okay, I don't have anything else to do with this game because it's done for me. Then a few weeks ago, like a month ago, I picked the game again, and it is amazing now, but only after release of 4 DLC packs. Only after this I was interested again. Third topic I wanted to talk about, which is the settings of the game. There are a ton of different first-person shooters out there. We have modern military shooters like Insurgency, Arma. We have futuristic shooters. The latest Call of Duties, not World War II, are good examples. The Titanfall series, the Star Wars Battlefront. You could play that in first person, right? And then we have games that went back to World War II or older wars, like Call of Duty World War II and a lot of World War II games. What I'm saying is that the next Battlefield game, the setting for the next Battlefield game should remain competitive. The game pace, which is delivered and dictated by that setting, should remain competitive. You can see that we have a game like Call of Duty World War II, and one of the reasons players stopped playing it and they were not as satisfied as everyone thought they'd be is that the pace of the game was not as they anticipated a World War II game would be. You see, they calculate something wrong and the game goes down. I'm not saying that the game is in a bad place, no, but it's not as good as they thought it'd be. This is the point. You have to maintain the competition in order to win it. And I think that the mainstream would think that Battlefield went back to World War II, not because of the fact that the previous game was set in World War I, but because of the fact that the main competitor went to World War II as well. This could be somehow destructive for the reputation of the game. I don't know, maybe. What I wanted to see for the next Battlefield game was somehow a Vietnam War, not a modern military shooter, not a let's say shooter from the past, a World War II shooter or World War I shooter, but rather a classic Vietnam shooter. We didn't have a fully fledged Battlefield game set during the Vietnam War, and that's a shame. We have Battlefield Vietnam, but that goes way back to 2003 and 4, which is pretty old. And we have an expansion pack for Battlefield Bad Company 2 Vietnam, which was awesome, but that was only an expansion. A few vehicles here and there, a few weapons, and of course 4 or 5 maps. That's all. That's about it, guys. This is my thoughts about a possible World War II Battlefield, and why I think that is not a very cool decision to see a World War II Battlefield coming out as opposed a different setting. I stated all my reasons, and I would love to hear your reasons in the comment section below. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.